Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers. Now that we've logged the requisite test miles, we are ready to give you our verdict on the new Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB. This is the new carbon racer from Brooks that features the new DNA Gold foam. That's 100% PEBA-midsole that aims to punch up the power over the previous Hyperion Elite 4 and try to put Brooks back into the race with the fastest race shoes going. So does it get there? Well, watch on to find out in our Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB review. Quick details then, and the stack height comes in at 40mm in the heel, 32mm in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. On weight it lands at 200 grams or 7.1 ounces in my UK men's 8.5 test shoe. On price it comes in at $250 in the US or £200 in the UK. Onto a quick shoe whip round then, and at first glance the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB looks like the Hyperion Elite 4. That's because pretty much everything is identical to the Elite 4. There's just one really important update. Brooks has swapped the DNA Flash foam for its new DNA Gold 100% PEBA foam. This is a high energy foam that works with a carbon fibre Speedvolt Race Plus, which is a plate with bending stiffness optimised for each shoe. Up top you've got the same highly perforated minimal airy knit uppers. You've got a flat knitted tongue with a little lace pinch padding, really minimal heel collars with quite a small horseshoe of internal padding for heel hold and comfort. And then when you flip them over, there is a good covering of outsole rubber across the forefoot here, the mid to forefoot. It's quite thick for a carbon racer actually. There's a little less in the heels, just in the impact zones. There's also a massive cutout trench in the midfoot section, although it is big enough, hopefully, to avoid any stone catching.
So in terms of fit, it's near identical to my time in the Elite 4. I think, that was one of the highlights of that shoe, the upper kind of makeup, the material, the overall fit. And I think, keeping the same kind of, approach here on the Elite 4 PB, I think was the right way to go. Now I've got mine in a UK size 8. That's exactly the same size as the previous shoe. I would go true to size, and it does fit true to size. For me, the space up front of the toe box is very good, giving you just enough room when you want to run and kind of race longer in this shoe. I think the approach to the kind of level of padding in the tongue and the heel collar is to kind of really hide it, keep the weight down, but still make sure you've got comfort in those key areas on the tongue. You can see it's a kind of skinny tongue, but you've got a good amount of padding just behind it to sit very comfortably on the top of your foot. The heel collar, I do prefer more traditional padding around that heel collar area. It's more internal here, and keeping it thinner around the exterior of that heel collar. It's been fine for me, offers just enough support and comfort and can offer that extra control there at the back of your heel. But yeah, I would prefer something, a little bit more traditional in that sense. If you had the Elite 4 in a UK size 8, for me, the Elite 4 PB fits exactly the same, so I would be going for the same size.
So when it comes to fit of the Hyperion Elite 4 PB for me, I was very happy with the shoe in my normal running shoe size. I think you've got a pretty standard size upper here. It's a very breathable and lightweight material, but it has held the foot nice and securely for me on the run, and I've not had any issues with its durability either so far. Don't love the little strip of padding you have around the back here. It's the kind of padding you see on shoes sometimes that irritates my Achilles that you always used to with the Vaporfly 3, but that hasn't been a problem with the Hyperion Elite 4 PB, and yeah, I would stick to your normal running shoe size. Got the same size here that I use across Brooks's range of shoes.
So fit for me in the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB. I'm a size 8 in the UK. This is a size 8. I found it to be a very, very comfortable shoe from the off. I really like this upper, this sort of breathable, meshy type upper. Really comfortable. Got really easy to get a nice lockdown fit in. It's a race shoe, but it's not the most restrictive race shoe I've tried in my size, so very comfortable from that perspective. There's probably a little bit less space before the big toe than some people would like based on sizing, but I was absolutely fine with it, so I'd definitely go to my size. If you like loads of extra space in the front of the toe, even in race shoes, you might want to size up half size, but I think it's a very comfortable shoe all round, and I'd definitely stay to my size in this shoe.
So when it comes to fit, I ran in my regular running shoe size in Brooks, which is a UK 8.5. And overall, this is something I really liked about the last generation shoes. I think they fit really well. The uppers are nice and light and airy. They feel race hugging. They've got that good race fit without being restrictive. They just feel pretty natural on the foot. They're easy to get on, easy to get good lockdown, hold well across the midfoot. The uppers are excellent. They're very highly perforated, and that creates a lot of airiness. There's plenty of room at the end of the toe box. Even though they do look a bit narrow, and they're almost sort of quite a narrow shoe, I don't get any restricted or rubbing or pushing on that little toe, which I can do with some shoes. That's a surprise to me because I thought I would, but I don't. So overall I get a good hold, just feels all locked in, snug, well held. Back up into the heel collars, it's obviously got a really minimal heel package, which holds really nicely. I don't have any slipping. There is a pad behind here. It's sort of the padding of the heel collar runs around. It's a very small internal pad. I have to make sure I get that in the right place. I almost have to pull these up. It does feel a little bit like there's a bit of pressure there sometimes. It doesn't give me any grief, but you are aware of it. Like now I can feel it just sort of whilst I'm filming this. When I'm moving, I don't really notice it, but it does make you think it's going to rub. It doesn't. Yeah, and overall, I would just describe this as a nice, snug, racy fit, and I would recommend going true to size in these shoes.
So I really like this shoe. I have been using it for a few different types of runs, but the main ones would be interval sessions, and I've done 2 part runs in this shoe now, and I've really enjoyed it for those faster bits. I've never really got on with a Brooks race shoe before, performance shoe, but this is very different than what I've experienced before. The midsole in it is fantastic. There's a nice little bit of bounce in it. Feels very light on the feet. It's a very nippy shoe. When I've been running park run in it, it's probably one of the best shoes that I've tested for a while for park run. That sort of short distance, nippy, lightweight speed that you need, this shoe is just fantastic for it. You get a nice bit of bounce off of it. It feels not overly aggressive, but it does feel like it's making you go a bit faster. Yeah, really enjoyed it for those. It actually reminds me of the Vaporfly 2, the same sort of experience you get from that shoe. Similar softness of foam, but with that Zoom X bounce back. And the carbon plate isn't massively aggressive, but it's still noticeable, and you get a nice little pickup when you're speeding up. So yeah, I really enjoyed using it for park run. It was absolutely great. That 5k distance interval session that I did in it was a mixture of different paces, but it was going down to my 10k pace, which is about 350 minute kilometers, and it felt great for that as well. It's just gives you, feels like it's a shoe that can accelerate really quickly, and that's because it just feels like you're not really wearing anything on the feet. It feels like the Vaporfly 2 basically. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this shoe. I think it's a really good option if you're looking for a carbon plate racer that is very similar to something like the Vaporfly 2. And I'd probably put it in between. There's a lot of carbon plate shoes coming out at the moment which have really big max stacks in. It doesn't feel like this shoe has loads and loads of foam in when you're running it. It actually feels like a more conventional shoe. It doesn't feel over the top. So if you're looking for a fast carbon plate race shoe and you don't want one of these really max stack shoes that's out there, this does feel like a bit of a compromise on that. I'd probably put it between something like the Vaporfly 2 and maybe like the Takumi Sen, something like that, where it does feel like a shorter distance shoe for me. I definitely wouldn't go I wouldn't do a marathon in this because I just don't think it's got enough cushioning for me that I like in a marathon. But anything up to half marathon distance, I think this shoe would be great, and I might use it for Brighton Half Marathon coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, really enjoyed the testing in this. The outsole on it, impressed with that. There's a really nice layer of rubber on it. There's a bit of exposed midsole on it, but no signs of wear or tear on that at all. And it's been absolutely fine for me on the wet ground, and it's been wet pretty much consistently while I've been testing this. So really solid all-round experience with this shoe.
So into that run test, and what I can say straight off the bat is that I've definitely preferred or enjoyed running more in this shoe compared to the previous Elite shoe, and you could probably level that to the Elite 3 as well. Now, I had the opportunity to race in the Elite 4 last year, around about this time, Barcelona Half Marathon, myself and Kieran. And there was definitely some things I liked about the Elite 4. I think from a weight point of view, I think it where it needed to kind of be up against the other carbon racing shoes and keeping things nice and light. I think, as I spoke about in the fit section, I love what kind of Brooks has done with the upper, and it's up there, one of the best uppers, I think, on a carbon racing shoe. I think there was elements of the ride that I did like. I think it had a good rocker. I think you knew the cushioning was well, protecting you very well overall. I just think it lacked a little bit of magic for me, a little bit more life. I'm expecting a little bit more bounce out of that midsole, and just kind of taking all those good qualities and really kind of, putting it together as a package. And I particularly found when I was tiring it in this shoe, I just wanted a little bit more from it. So I think changing that one thing has really changed what it's like to run in the Elite 4 now that it has that PEBA, which we know works really well in other carbon racing shoes. Now, it's not the same kind of PEBA you're going to get in other shoes that kind of feature it. I do still think it is, you know, not as super soft and light. There's still kind of a little touch of firmness to it, which is kind of what you want when you are racing a little bit harder. I think you notice it a little bit further up front in this shoe. But it's definitely bouncier, it's definitely more lively. I've definitely found when I've tired in longer runs or kind of harder sessions that I know I've got something on my feet that is going to just make that kind of time a little bit more kind of bearable. And that's really what's kind of shone through for me in my time in Elite 4 PB. It's, as I said, it had all the things that already worked for it kind of well in place, and adding that midsole foam, just changing things up, just makes it, you know, bouncier, livelier, roll through a lot nicer. And particularly I've noticed it in my longer runs where it hasn't felt kind of tough to want to spend a lot of time in this shoe. And I think from an outsole point of view, you're not getting huge amounts of rubber, but what you are getting is a good amount of rubber in the kind of key areas. I think from a gripping point of view, I've run in wet conditions, it's felt fine for me. I think, you know, I did the same thing with the Elite 3 and it was pretty solid on the Elite 4, and, you know, things haven't changed that much from an outsole point of view, so that's all positive for me. I think the one thing I would say that maybe a slight negative for me is that when I have tired, when my form has maybe dropped a little, maybe introducing that more lively foam has kind of introduced a little bit more of a kind of unstable feel to this shoe, and I have found I've kind of moved around a little bit in this shoe, so that would be something I'd be a little bit wary about. And if you're not at your best in this shoe, then there may be, you know, some kind of stability things to kind of look out there, but the good for me definitely outweigh the bad. As I said, there were loads of good things about the Hyperion Elite 3. It just needed a better foam to go with all those qualities. And I think what that has done, or what Brooks has done by adding that PEBA, is take all the good stuff it's done and really kind of make this a shoe that feels like it's better in keeping with the other carbon racing shoes. So definitely a positive experience for me. Definitely a shoe I think I'd feel more comfortable running longer in, racing longer in, and still being a shoe that you can use for your faster sessions as well.
So I said it in the first run, I was pretty excited to test this carbon race shoe. There was quite a lot I liked about the original Hyperion Elite 4. I like the fit, the comfort, the reliability of the platform. I just found that it really lacked the sort of punchy edge of some of the very best carbon race shoes. Now in testing, I've done close to 50 miles in the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB. I've done a couple of big marathon training runs, 120 miles with a mix of marathon pace and slower miles, and one 17 miler where I tried to run sub 7 minute miles until I couldn't run sub 7 minute miles anymore. I've also done some shorter, faster bits and some slower, easier stuff, what you might describe as the kind of wheels have come off pace. Now, first up, I'm glad a lot has stayed the same. When you first pop these shoes on, they've got good overall comfort. The step-in is really good. I found it easy to lace them into a comfy lockdown. Everything feels light and agile, roomy, and it feels like it belongs on your foot from the moment you put it on. That energetic DNA gold foam gives you that immediate kind of let's run fast super shoe vibe. Then when you get moving, it really comes to life. There's much more here, I think, than you get in the Elite 4. It's a notable step up. For the marathon pace miles, I immediately felt good return. The midsole plate combo definitely urges you to move faster, but with a stable, consistent platform. There's more than a little of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris vibe to this shoe in terms of the sort of shape and geometry, and a little bit to the energy, though I think there's a little stiffness, or a little extra stiffness I should say, in the Metaspeed that makes them feel a bit more propulsive to me. I like that stiffness, but if you found the Metaspeed Paris maybe a bit harsh at times, then these might give you a slightly softer cushioned edge. They might suit you a little bit better. Now the Hyperion Elite 4 PB certainly has a more reliable platform than the softer Adios Pro 4, particularly when you're moving slower or landing slower further back on the shoe. But during that 17 mile run, I was hitting mile after mile 10 to 20 seconds faster than I'd aimed without paying too much of a price. And this is definitely a shoe with race and PB credentials. If the Hyperion Elite 4 was missing the super shoe punch, I think the PEBA midsole has turned things up a couple of notches at least. I said it in the first run vid, but what I really like as well is that on the slower miles, when you're maybe landing a little bit further back in the shoe, it still feels nicely protective. There's not too much instability, got a good bit of cushion that cuts away most of the potential harshness. On both long runs I wasn't spared foot fatigue entirely, but there was nothing over and above what you'll get from 99% of race shoes on race day. Some super shoes excel when you're moving all out, but leave you compromising on comfort or confidence in your foot strike when you drop to those kind of slower paces. I didn't get any of that here.
So I've run 110k in the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB, and it's impressed me greatly. Like, it landed at a key point of my marathon training with some big peak weeks of lots of long workouts. So I've used this shoe for some really testing stuff, and I've been really impressed. I do think Brooks now has, a proper carbon plate shoe in its lineup, and one that can contend with the options from other brands. So as I said, there's been some big runs in this shoe. I think out of the box I did a 22 miler in it with the second half at a decent pace. I've also done a really hard progression hour on the track, like one of my harder workouts of this cycle, and then probably my hardest workout actually of this whole cycle for the marathon in Seville, which was 10k at 3:30 a k pace, then park run all out, and then 10k at 3:30 per k pace again afterwards. So a couple of runs over 30k in the shoe, and like I say, 110k in total, and it's really worked well for me in every single one of those runs. I have been really impressed by it. So the ride is not super soft and as unnaturally springy as with some super shoes, but it has quite a nice natural feel to it. I don't think it's particularly stable. It's quite a narrow shoe, but I do think it has more of a normal feeling ride compared to some of those shoes. It's probably more akin to shoes like the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris or Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 than shoes like the Cielo from Hoka or the Alphafly, which have very big springy ride. You've got more of a fast turner over in the shoe, and you don't sink in quite so much at the heel, but you more get pushed onto that forefoot where you get a really nice responsive ride from it. It's still really comfortable though. Like I said, I've done 2 longer sessions in it and I've had no problems with comfort. You can definitely look at this as a marathon racing shoe, but it also has the lightweight nippy feel that you like on those shorter races. So in that park run I ran in the longer session with those 2 10Ks, I ran a 16:16 and just felt pretty controlled and turning over really nicely in the shoe for the first half of that and then pushing on in the second half. And it does feel it has any gear to it for racing. You can go and do the short races in it, and I think it also has the comfort and protection you need for a marathon whilst retaining speed as well. Grip's been pretty good for me as well during my testing. Like, I've run on a greasy track and greasy pavements in general in the winter, if not flat out wet at times as well, and the grip's always been there. And certainly this DNA Gold foam is a very different proposition to what we've had from Brooks in the past. Obviously with this shoe they've just swapped that foam in instead of building a shoe around the foam, so it'll be really interesting to see how it feels on things like the Hyperion Elite 5 or even the Hyperion Max 3, which I think is going to have some of this PEBA foam in. But I've been saying for a while, Brooks needs a PEBA foam or a PEBA-like foam. Because actually some brands are now moving on from PEBA to different kinds of foams. Like Puma have got a aliphatic TPU. I think some others are using some kind of TPE foams, things like that. Lots of acronyms and stuff like that. But for a long time it was all PEBA, but now we have a bit more of a mix. But the result is the same. You want a lightweight, energetic foam, and that's what you've got here. This shoe, just swapping the foam in this shoe compared to the Hyperion Elite 4 Standard Edition makes it lighter, softer, springier, faster, more comfortable. Just everything good comes from changing that foam like that. So certainly it's massively improved the shoe and given Brooks its best racer ever. And all round, I've had a really enjoyable run test in the Hyperion Elite 4 PB. It's performed at a high level in all the workouts I've asked of it.
My verdict on the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB, I think it's a great shoe. I think it's the best race shoe that Brooks has made. I think it's up there with the top tier carbon plate racers out there. I think it's a shoe that really, for me, sits around that 10k mark. I definitely put it down as a 5-10k shoe for me. But I could run a half marathon now. I think it'd be absolutely fine. Might even test that out at Brighton Half Marathon. But I think it's a really good all-round race shoe that just feels comfortable. That midsole is fantastic. Doesn't feel too unstable as well. You normally expect that with Brooks. So all in all, I've really enjoyed testing this. I think it's a fantastic shoe and a shoe that I want to pick up when I'm going out to do faster sessions or park runs or races or things like that. Definitely like to do a 10k race in this shoe. So a big fan of it. As I said earlier, I think it's very similar to something like the Vaporfly 2 for me, which is still one of my favourite race shoes of all time. It's a fantastic shoe, and I used it for many, many races. I think this has a similar vibe to that shoe. I think you'll get a similar experience. Doesn't feel overwhelmingly cushioned. Doesn't feel like there's loads on your feet. It just feels very fast, lightweight, and very comfortable, and you get a nice bit of bounce on it as well. So really impressed with this shoe. Definitely worth looking at, and I wouldn't have said that before about most of Brooks' performance shoes.
Verdict then, and for me the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB has impressed in testing. It's got most of what I want in a good go-get-'em race day option. Good easy comfort from the uppers, snug and supportive fit that's not too restrictive, a roomy enough toe box that doesn't leave you with black toenails. This shoe disappears nicely on the foot and lets you go about the business of racing fast. You can almost forget that you're wearing it. Then underneath there's a very lively midsole that not only offers good spring and bounce, but it does it with a good consistency. I talk a lot about controlled energy in shoes that I like, and the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB delivers that. It's certainly not a wild shoe, not as wild as some shoes. In recent runs in the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2 and the Adios Pro 4, I sometimes felt I was kind of having to tame the shoe a bit. But with the Hyperion Elite 4 PB, you run the shoe, it doesn't run you. And even though it has a somewhat narrower platform, similar to the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris, I had confidence in each strike. I knew what I was going to get. I had confidence in my landings and the toe-offs and the control. For me, it meets that critical criteria. It makes you feel faster. Now, I also ran in some wet conditions and the grip also performed well, though I was running in a straight line. Overall, I think this is a fast, smooth, energetic shoe that puts Brooks right back in the conversation when it comes to competitive race day shoes. Has it replaced the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris as my go-to racer? I think it's a close call, but I think I like the stiffer ride of the Metaspeed slightly better. But we will have a head-to-head on the channel between those shoes very soon, where we'll give the final verdict on that.
So my take on the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB is that Brooks, this is more like it. I think this is a shoe now that I personally would feel more confident and more kind of comfortable running and racing longer distances in. And I think if you liked the Hyperion Elite 4, was just hoping for a little bit more, I think there is enough in that one change to make the upgrade and get a better shoe out of it. I think if you look at it against other carbon racing shoes, it's definitely now competing better with those other options. From a price point of view, it is less than a lot of the competition. They're sitting at around £200. You know, it's good value at that kind of very kind of expensive end of the carbon racing shoe market. I think one problem it has is in the form of the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3, which is less than £200, only slightly less, but it is less than £200. I think in that shoe, you are getting something similarly that is light, fits really well, has a really enjoyable ride, and you've got that kind of very good Puma grip outsole. From a gripping point of view, you know you're going to get something that's going to work well in kind of rainy and wet conditions, and you know when you have to race in those kind of tougher conditions. I personally would probably still be going for the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. I think I've had a nicer, more memorable experience from that shoe. But if I had the Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB, if I had a half marathon race tomorrow or the next few weeks, and I was looking for a shoe to really, that I felt confident in, that was going to give me a good experience, I definitely feel that I now have that in the Hyperion Elite 4 PB. So I think my biggest takeaway is that I think maybe Brooks going forward could be more aggressive with the pricing. You know, it is already, I think, when you compare it to what else is out in this category, then it might kind of, you know, compete a little bit better, and it may pull some people away from wanting or needing to have to spend a lot more money. I've really liked this shoe. I've enjoyed running in this shoe compared to the previous shoes. And I think if you're a Brooks fan, a Brooks kind of speed racing shoe fan, you're going to like what's been done on the Elite 4 PB. It's just whether I'd pick it over other shoes that are around this price, where I think maybe you're getting similar experience or performance, or maybe slightly superior performance for a little bit less money.
So my verdict, it took Brooks way too long to deliver a shoe like this, but they now have, you know, a proper carbon plate racing shoe in their lineup with a PEBA foam in the midsole, and that just transforms the feel of the shoe. The Hyperion Elite 4 PB is Brooks' best racer ever, and a shoe that really does the business in terms of competing with the performance of other carbon plate shoes. There are still some I'd probably have ahead of it myself, which we'll go on to, but now if you want to stick with Brooks and just get their best racer, and you get the Hyperion Elite 4 PB, you're going to have a shoe that can go toe-to-toe with pretty much anything out there. I really think it's very impressive. So, as I said, there are some shoes that I rate ahead of it, and there are other caveats here that might put you off buying the Hyperion Elite 4 PB just at this moment. First is the Hyperion Elite 5, which Brooks has already trailed and kind of shown off at running events and stuff like that. It's coming later this year. That's a shoe that's going to be built around the DNA Gold foam, so you might get an even better ride out of that. It's not too far away, so they did, I think, need to bring out this shoe just to replace the Hyperion Elite 4 to give them something that is competitive with the rest of the market right now. But if you are looking at the shoe, you might want to consider holding off until the Hyperion Elite 5 in case that's another step up again. And then looking at the market at large, the price is really good on the Hyperion Elite 4 in the UK, where I think only really the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 is cheaper than it. And in the US, though, there are some cheaper models, and I do think there are a couple I have ahead of it. One of those is the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3, actually, and that's a shoe that has quite a similar feel, but I think has a slightly more responsive ride to it. It's a tad lighter, it's a tad cheaper, cheaper. It's got a tad better grip even. It's just a shoe that I think is a very slight upgrade on the Hyperion Elite 4 PB, whilst feeling pretty similar. So I do think I'd look at that first before looking at the Brooks. ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris has a slightly different feel, but it's a more responsive, aggressive shoe, I think. I prefer it for racing. It's cheaper in the US, more expensive in the UK, but it's a little bit lighter, and I think it's just the top shoe out there for me right now. Also, if you're craving the really bouncy, springy feeling you can get from some carbon shoes, you don't really get that with the Brooks. It has like a slightly more natural feel, like I say. I still think it's got the speed, but if you want that springy feeling, then you're going to get it from shoes like the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0, the Nike Alphafly 3, even the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2 has a softer, bouncier feel to it. This has more of a standard feel, but it does the business in terms of performance. So I do think if you pick it up, you won't be disappointed in it as a racing shoe. I think it's a really good shoe all round, but there are a few shoes I'd pick up ahead of it. And even if you really are in love with Brooks in general, maybe I'd look at waiting for the Hyperion Elite 5. And the big one I think is probably that Puma right now, because I do think they have quite similar feels. It's a bit cheap if you're not looking at something like the ASICS or one of the big springy shoes. But overall, kudos to Brooks for finally getting there with their carbon plate racing shoe. I'd say I really was impressed by this during testing. Like I say, some of the hardest workouts I've done in my marathon training for this block were done in this shoe, and it always performed really well. Not necessarily one I'd rush to buy myself right now, but if you do, you're going to get a very good racing shoe.
So there you have it. That's our verdict on the new Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 PB. We hope you found it informative. We'd love it if you would hit like if you did, and make sure that you're subscribed. Don't forget to ring that bell if you do subscribe. That way you can hear about future videos when they land on the channel, including the many head-to-heads that we're likely to have, pitching this shoe and the latest other carbon race shoes up against each other. Now, if you're in the market for a race shoe, I'm going to pop a video up on the channel right now that you should go and watch. Otherwise, thanks very much for stopping by, and until next time, happy running, people.